Welcome to 2819. This is the show where we aim to inspire you to become disciples of all nations. I'm Sandra Dimes.
And I'm Bryan Rohrenbacher, and this is a television outreach of Reasons to Believe, a viewer-supported ministry where science and faith converge.
And as you're watching the show, if you want to support resources like this, visit reasons.org/2819.
We also want to make sure that you're subscribing to our YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. Keep up to date on all our new videos. If you're not watching on YouTube, go ahead and check out our channel. It's youtube.com/reasons-to-believe1. We want to make sure that you're keeping up to date on all the new resources we're putting out.
And you can also keep up to date if you follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 2819 Show. We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on the show.
And don't forget, you can get the podcast version of 2819. It's on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Just search Reasons to Believe podcast.
And the key verse that we have here at Reasons to Believe is 1 Peter 3:15, which calls for us to share the reason for the hope that we have in Christ.
And we want to help you share that hope. So now through January 27th, you can enter our Ultimate AMP giveaway.
Yes, just visit ampconference.com/ultimate to enter and receive 10% off both day tickets.
AMP Conference takes place March 8th through 9th in Fullerton, California. We're going to be there and we hope to see you there too.
Now it's time for a quick rundown. In the Nexus segment, Hugh Ross will answer the question, if the multiverse is true, is there a need for God? Very important question.
And in Culture Talk, I'm actually going to be joining Sandra on that one for my first Culture Talk segment. And we're going to be talking about AMP Conference and how you can help share your faith in Christ.
And in our Give and Take section, Hugh Ross will answer the question, will scientists find life beyond Earth soon?
First up, we have RTB 101, and Krista will be talking with Rana, answering the question, does junk DNA prove evolution is a fact? Let's check that out.
Now it's time for RTB 101. This is the segment where we talk about practical questions to help train you to share your faith with friends and family more effectively. And one of the most common evidences for common descent is the existence of junk DNA. And here to help me talk about it is biochemist Dr. Rana. Welcome, Fuzz.
Krista, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a great question because I think that this is probably even an evidence for evolution that most people are at least aware of because it's just in the news a lot. So let's talk about, always like to start with a definition. Yeah. What is junk DNA and how is it used as an evidence for evolution?
Well, loosely speaking, junk DNA refers to regions in the genomes of organisms that consist of non-functional DNA sequences. And there's a number of different classes of junk DNA that have been identified. And many people are under the perception that perhaps a vast proportion of the genomes of organisms consist of junk DNA.
So non-functional DNA. It doesn't seem to perform a function.
That's exactly right.
So what is it doing there is kind of the thought.
Yes. I mean, why would a creator create genomes of organisms, like let's say human beings, that has 95% non-functional DNA?
Got it.
This doesn't look like the handiwork of a creator, but something that evolution would produce. And
some sort of evolutionary leftovers? Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a number of ways in which the different types of junk DNA can be generated according to evolutionary biologists.
Okay.
For example, you could have functional regions in the genome that get damaged, or a viral infection can take place, and that viral genetic material gets incorporated into the host genome and then gets rearranged and genetically altered.
Okay.
And so people argue that we know how these junk DNA sequences presumably form, and it looks like they're evolutionary processes, not the handiwork, again, of a creator.
Okay, so that sounds to me, just on the surface of it, to be pretty slam dunk evidence that to support biological evolution or common descent.
Yeah, it's a very strong argument.
Okay.
And what's even more troubling is that you have shared sequences of junk DNA in genomes of organisms that cluster together naturally. So humans and chimps, for example, share a number of junk DNA sequences in corresponding locations in our genomes. So when you put this all together, you got a very compelling case for biological evolution.
So if humans and chimps are on the same kind of evolutionary tree and they have similar quote unquote junk DNA sequences, maybe that traces back to some common ancestor back there where they got that.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yes.
So help us think this through from a creation model perspective, because we have reasons to believe we are more skeptical that that evolution is true. But this seems like compelling evidence. So walk us through that.
Well, I remember when I officially started with Reasons to Believe back in 1999.
You and I started almost the same time.
Yeah, we did. Well, there was really nothing we could say at that time in response to this junk DNA challenge. In fact, one of the first articles I wrote was addressing the junk DNA issue, and I made the prediction at that time that we would eventually discover that junk DNA has function. And so that's kind of the expectation from a creation model perspective, is that this junk DNA, if it is functional, then you could understand it as reflecting design elements in the genome and the shared features reflecting, shared design.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you started, I think I even remember that article. It might have been called like DNA Not So Junky or something.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That is the article.
This might be still on our website. It could be a golden oldie. But now, as you're thinking about it, did you have a sense of the prophetic then? Like, how has that trend line developed since 1999, where you were kind of dipping your toe in the water saying, I think this might have function? Where are we at now?
Well, this is the thing that's remarkable is I remember in the 2000s when the discoveries began trickling in saying, but wait a minute, what we thought was junk turns out to be functional. And then the pace of those discoveries picked up, and it looked as if these weren't just simply oddities here and there where junk DNA evolved function, but it seemed to be pervasive. And kind of the capstone was in 2012 when the ENCODE project published phase 2 results that indicated a vast proportion of the human genome, and likely the genomes of organisms, very well may be functional. And since that time, there are mounting discoveries that indicate virtually every class of junk DNA is functional. So we've seen a complete revision of how we think of genomes from being a wasteland of evolutionary debris to actually being these incredibly elegant and sophisticated systems that are far more complex than anybody would have ever imagined.
So maybe you turned out to be a little bit of a prophet.
It's showing that this idea of a creation model has actually merit.
There it is.
It's the proper way to think about biology, because if it indeed the creation model is true, what we predicted with junk DNA should have turned out exactly the way that it has.
So the nomenclature of junk DNA, that kind of needs to almost be done away with, it seems like. It's not really indicative of what the current understanding is.
That's right. And in fact, many people are now agreeing that it was premature to conclude that junk DNA was indeed junk.
Very good. Well, I would encourage you to check out Fuzz's blog. You can go to our website and do a search for The Cell's Design.
I remember back in the 1980s telling university audiences, eventually the fine-tuning evidence for the creator God of the Bible scientifically will become so overwhelming that the non-theists will have nowhere else to go but to hypothesize an infinite number of universes where every universe is different, where they'll claim that we happen to live in the one lucky universe where everything has just the right features and characteristics. And it was none other than Leonard Susskind, an atheist theoretical physicist, said, this is a terrible argument for us atheists, basically making the point that any theory that explains everything explains nothing. And that's all he said. What I've done in The Creator and the Cosmos is to give you an example of what he was talking about. That if you really have that kind of a multiverse, you're going to have an infinite variety of birch trees. And if you know anything about birch trees, they peel white pieces of bark. Well, if you've got an infinite variety of species of birch trees, one of them will be peeling pieces of white bark that measure 8.5 by 11 inches. And on an infinite number of planets, those pieces of bark will fall on soil that's got random chemicals in it that make markings on these pieces of bark that look exactly like all the equations, diagrams, letters, paragraphs that you see in every research paper published by every non-theistic scientist. Which means those papers didn't come from their mind, it came from the multiverse. And that's kind of Leonard Susskind's point. You would not only be explaining away divine design, you're explaining away every human design. You have a philosophical inconsistency. But the other thing I would add, I think there is a way to put this to a positive test. if the atheistic version of the multiverse is correct, then at some point, this accumulating fine-tuning evidence will begin to go down rather than up. So if the theistic version is correct, the more we learn about the universe, the greater and greater will become the fine-tuning evidence that that creator God was responsible. But if it really is the atheistic version of the multiverse, at some point we'd expect to see declining evidence for that fine-tuning design. So what's been the track record of the past 50 years? It's always gone up. Moreover, it's not only gone up, it's gone up exponentially, which is something we document in the 4th edition of The Creator and the Cosmos.
If you'd like to see the full clip, go to Reasons to Believe 1 on YouTube and search for Reasons Forum. Now it's time for Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about the intersection of science, faith, and pop culture, and how culturally relevant topics can be used to start conversations about your faith. I'm joined with my co-host, Bryan Rohrenbacher. Hello.
Hey, I've always loved this segment, so I'm so happy I can actually be part of it now.
I'm excited to have you here. You are our outreach manager
Yes.
of the universe.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
And you're going to be talking about AMP conference.
Mm-hmm.
So something that is important to Reasons to Believe is really to equip people to share their faith. So tell us what the AMP conference is going to be doing to help that.
Yeah, so our AMP conference is our annual 2-day apologetic conference. And AMP stands for Apologetics Mission Partnership. And it's all about teaching people apologetics for the sake of evangelism so they can go out and be missional. Mm-hmm. And we partner with other great organizations and universities like RZIM, Biola University, and Southern Evangelical Seminary.
Wonderful. So we have some really good partnership there for AMP, but we also have some amazing speakers. Can you give us kind of a few speakers that we're going to be having?
Yes. Well, from RTB, we have Hugh Ross, AJ Roberts, and Ken Sample speaking this year. And they've all done great in the past, so I'm looking forward to them. On top of that, we also have Sean McDowell, Abdu Murray, and Richard Howe from SES that's going to be coming for the first time. And a couple that I'm really excited for is Jim and Karen Covell, which they're going to be their first time speaking at AMP, and we're really excited for that one.
So Jim and Karen Covell, they are from the Hollywood Prayer Network, correct?
That's right.
So they're working in the industry, and they're really doing what they can to reach those in the industry as well, like connecting with people in Hollywood and connecting with Christians and helping to spread the gospel there. So I'm excited for that one. Can you say any panels that you're excited for?
Oh gosh, I am very excited for Richard Howe. I've been able to see him in a couple other conferences, and he's a very smart guy, but also knows how to give a great message and is even entertaining too.
Yeah.
And like you, I'm excited for Jim and Karen, and even AJ Roberts. She did her first talk at AMP a few years ago, and it was "Why Would a Good God Create Viruses," which has been one of my favorite talks. So it's going to be great to see what she brings to it this year.
Yeah, and I'm definitely excited for it. Now, I know that our AMP attendees, they have a lot of positive things to say. What would you say is kind of the most important thing that you're hoping AMP attendees will take from this conference?
Yeah, definitely just confidence to share their faith. That's always the biggest thing. That's the whole purpose of AMP, is that they feel confident to go and do that. But then it's not just that confidence, but it's also that they learn strategies and tactics on how to do so in a loving way and how to make it relevant to today's culture. And so you can really reach new people and reach your friends that you might not have known how to talk about before, because some of the topics can be very sensitive. But we have great speakers that will really kind of train you on how to start these conversations and how to go about answering all those questions that your skeptics friends have.
Right. That's such an important point about how to engage today's culture, because that's something that stops a lot of Christians. We don't know how to even address some of the tricky, sensitive questions and doubts. So I think AMP is really great at equipping believers to not only know how to resolve some issues for their own struggles, but how to then take the encouragement that they get from AMP to then go ahead and spread the gospel and spread hope. I mean, there are so many people who are just longing for hope. So that's what I love about AMP. What I also love about AMP is that we do more than just provide those 2 days. Tell us about some of the other stuff that our AMP attendees can see and what we give them access to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's always the opportunity to talk to our speakers in person. No promises, but a lot of times they do come out to the exhibit hall and hang out their book table. So there's that chance to interact with them there personally. We also do Q&A about 3 or 4 times throughout the conference. So you can text in your question, and if there's something you didn't cover but you really just want answered, there's that opportunity as well. And a lot of times people might hold back because they're afraid of asking their question,
Right.
but so many times other people are thinking the same thing. It's such a blessing to them. On top of that, we always release the AMP videos later on down the road. So if you've been following us on Twitter or Facebook, you've been seeing that we've recently been putting out last year's videos from AMP. And what we do is we also provide discussion questions for some of those. So it's a great way to follow up because there's so much information you take it in 2 days. But then afterwards, you can rewatch these videos. You can kind of go over the discussion questions and even, have friends over, do a Bible study on this stuff and just really get more information. And on top of that, there's, like I said, we have the exhibit hall with lots of sponsors and speakers who have their own book tables. So it's a great time to pick up some new resources that can help equip you.
Well, I'm in. I know you're going to be there. I'm going to be there. So those who are interested, how can they register?
Yeah, go to ampconference.com. You can get all the information about the additional speakers. You can register there. And this is all going to be taking place March 8th through 9th.
And it will be where?
This is going to be at EV Free Fullerton in California.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us. So if you want to hear more about AMP Conference, go to ampconference.com. And really, we hope that you'll take the call to go and make disciples of all nations. Now we're going to head over to Jeff with Give and Take.
Hello, Jeff Zwerig here, and welcome again to Give and Take. This is the segment of our show where we explore fascinating and interesting scientific topics to help you be more confident in the truth of Christianity. Today I'm joined by President of Reasons to Believe, Hugh Ross, and we're going to investigate just how close are astronomers to finding life somewhere beyond the confines of the solar system. Hugh, it's good to have you here again today.
Well, thank you.
So this is something that people talk a lot about. I mean, there's been a lot of headlines, oh, we found habitable planets. It kind of gives the impression we're right on the borderline of finding life out in the universe. But yet it seems like we're always just on the borderline. It never happens. So what is it that's so difficult about finding life beyond here on Earth?
Well, the difficulty is coming up with an actual chemical signature of life. I mean, Rana and I were at a conference in The Origin of Life that said the only way we're ever going to have a signal of life is if we see ozone in the planet's atmosphere. Because here on Earth, it's life that produces molecular oxygen, and from that we get ozone. Ozone produces a very sharp, distinguishable spectral line. So they said that's really our only hope of ever being able to detect the possible existence of life on another planet.
Okay. So it seems like there's at least one problem of you've got to find something that is a signature of life that isn't, or that we see here on Earth that presumably as we're looking at other planets would be a signature. It seems like it's actually difficult to actually find anything on another planet in the first place when you get outside our solar system. Is that not correct?
This particular conference was making the point that the technology is at hand to see ozone spectral lines on planets that have the features that would at least indicate a possibility.
So can we find light signatures from other planets outside our solar system?
Well, I remember talking with the person who gave this paper and saying, is ozone really a unique signal for life? And they said, it's the best one we got.
Right.
But a paper just got published making the point that there's a lot of ways you can get ozone in a planet's atmosphere without any life being there at all. Bottom line, they were saying, if you've got a moist atmosphere and you don't have a huge amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere like you do on Earth, you will get molecular oxygen, you will get ozone, and it'll have nothing to do with life on that planet.
Oh, okay. So kind of let's take a little bit of a step back there because, okay, so we're looking for oxygen. Oxygen is obviously incredibly important to life here on Earth.
For our kind of life.
Kind of life. Yeah. And the challenge there is that oxygen is incredibly reactive. We think, 20% of oxygen in the atmosphere, that's no big deal. But given how reactive oxygen is, that means it's got to be regularly resupplied into the atmosphere.
Right.
So that's presumably why looking for ozone, which is another form of oxygen, that's why that's a signature of life, because given how reactive any sort of oxygen is, presumably it would just react and not be any free oxygen in the atmosphere. Is that basically the thought process there?
That's the thought process. And the idea is that ozone is a lot easier to detect than molecular oxygen in a planet's atmosphere. So that's what we should go for.
Okay, can you give a little bit of explanation? Why is ozone easier to detect than just regular oxygen?
Well, it's much rarer than oxygen, but it produces a unique spectral line that's really distinct. and bright. And so that's why they say, hey, it's going to be really hard to try to do it with oxygen, but ozone, that's an easy way to go.
Okay, so oxygen has some signatures. Those might be difficult to separate from other things. Ozone, if it's there, it's going to have a distinctive signature. Now, the problem is, what you're alluding to there is that even if we find ozone, that's not a unique signature of life, or life isn't the only way you're going to get the ozone.
Well, as you know, water is a very abundant molecule in the universe.
Correct.
It comes right after hydrogen 2 and hydrogen 3. So the universe, as I remind people, is soaking wet.
Right.
So likely...
That sounds bizarre, but it is. Water is the third most abundant molecule in the universe.
It is. And so having a planet with a moist atmosphere, if it's in the liquid water habitable zone, is almost a given. And what these scientists were pointing out, unless the planet has a huge amount of molecular nitrogen in its atmosphere like Earth does, you're going to get from non-life mechanisms a whole lot of oxygen and ozone. And therefore they're saying ozone and oxygen are only possible signatures for life if you already know that the planet's atmosphere has about 80% nitrogen in it, just like the Earth.
Now, I will say, if we go out and find a planet that has free oxygen in its atmosphere, that may not, if I get what you're saying, it's not a definitive signature, but it's certainly very provocative and would indicate to people that this planet has certainly a very good chance of finding or being life there.
I would argue possible, but not probable, because having a planet with 80% nitrogen in its atmosphere is going to be a rare outcome.
Okay, but let's say, regardless, say we find some sort of signature that looks like there's life there. What if we find life? What does that mean? And kind of looking at it from an evangelistic standpoint, whenever these announcements of life come out, we're pretty excited about it. So it's an opportunity to talk about it. How do we use that search for life to transition to a conversation about the gospel?
Well, there's a lot of Christian astronomers I know, Jeff, who argue that the discovery of life on another planet would be a huge benefit for the Christian faith, because we already know it takes supernatural intervention for the origin of life. So if we find another planet, that means God did it twice.
That's a different, I want to just highlight that, because that's so different than the way it often comes across. It's so rare for the conditions for life to be met that here on Earth is the only place we expect it. What you're saying, if I get what you're saying correct, is that we don't expect life here on Earth unless God intervened. So if we find it somewhere else, that's another signature of God intervening.
Well, theologically, it looks like God really enjoys creating, just based on what we see here on Earth, just how full our planet is of life and how long it's been here. And so from that perspective, it's like if God enjoys creating that much, why would he stop on one planet?
So as a Christian, we don't have to really be that worried about what we're going to find out there, that we might actually find life, and that would be perfectly consistent with God creating it.
Either way, it's an exciting breakthrough for the Christian faith. If we're unique, that tells us something, that God basically is targeting our planet to bring about the ultimate conquest of evil, entry into the new creation. If there's lots of planets with life on, it's like, wow, this shows just how much God enjoys creating. And so I'd be excited either way, but you and I know, looks like so far the evidence is telling us that Earth seems to be unique, because everywhere we look, we're not finding conditions beyond Earth that are suitable for life.
Well, and I would argue it's pretty hard, it's pretty challenging to find those signatures, so we may just not be able to.
We may not be able to do it.
I'm with you. I'm excited one way or the other.
Either
Whether
way.
we find life or we're rare, that does a lot to give us reasons to go talk about the Creator and how he's fashioned us to live life. Thanks, Hugh. I appreciate your comments. This is something that people just enjoy talking about, the prospect of finding life beyond the confines of Earth. I do have to say, when I first personally was exposed to the idea, it seemed like it was kind of a threat. Would that mean that God wasn't the creator? And as I investigated it, and as Hugh outlined here, that whether God created life just here on Earth, and that's a very distinct possibility, or whether he created it throughout the universe, all of that life is going to be a signature pointing back to him. I would encourage you to go to reasons.org and check out Hugh's blog, Is Ozone and Oxygen a Signature for Life?, so that you can be better equipped to use this search for life in your conversations where you get to go out and tell others about Christ.
That does it for us this week on 2819.
We hope that this episode has really encouraged you to share your faith with someone new and to do so with confidence and compassion.
And if you feel led to support resources like this show, please visit reasons.org/2819.
Also, don't forget, grab your phones right now, connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 2819 Show.
That does it for us this week. We'll see you all next time and hope to see you at AMP.
Bye.